Hello, everybody. Pastor Randy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. Great to be with you on this beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. Hope you're well wherever you are today. We started a brand new teaching yesterday, watching our work, and I ended off the show with a question of what do you do, but why do you do it? Now, again, we're not talking about our specific job, our career, how we earn our living or what have you, but rather, what are we doing for the Lord? That's specific, okay? So again, I have to be sometimes very clear in my messaging of who I'm talking to. And in this particular case, this is a challenge to the believer. What we have to watch for, friends, is that we don't forget and we don't get confused between the temporary and the eternal. You see, because today we see so much stuff that is vying for our attention. And we see so much division and so much, just breaking everything down today that it is very easy to get lost in the confusing nature of all of that. Who's right, who's wrong? And I see it all the time, of course, because I am a student of ministry circles and seeing it, not to compare and not to condemn or condone. It's not about anything. It's about what's going on, who's teaching what's happening, what are people hearing, and oftentimes what we find is this thing gets so confusing and so anti what the Lord said. He said, don't add to stuff, don't take away stuff. Just tell them what I said. And what happens is in the midst of all of that, we forget and we lose sight of the temporary and the eternal, the value of both. And so what we do and why we do it factors into that. So watching our work, we have to pause. We have to ask that question. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 16, what does one profit if they gain the whole world while at the same time loses their very soul? But then there's another part of that, because he asked this question. He said, what will one give in exchange for their soul? Now that's a very important question, because what happens is in the midst of trying to keep up with the Joneses, and this happens in every circle, whether it is your neighbor beside you or whether it is the church that's 2 miles down the road from yours that seems to be doing a little bit better. Well, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. But why? Why? What is the reason that we're doing that? Is it to glorify God? Is it to bring more to Christ? Or is it to make ourselves look better than them? What are we doing? Temporary versus eternal. And so we see here, and I love that question, what would one give in exchange for their soul? Well, we think today, that sounds silly. Nobody would do that. They do it every day. They do it every day. I want my name in lights. Well, what are you willing to do to get it? I want this. What are you willing to do to get it? I heard this interview with a vile person. And I hate to say that, but this person, of course, is in the pornography industry. That's what they do, okay? And everybody's got their view on that. But what I found disturbing was his methodology. Someone asked him, they said, how do you get these beautiful young girls, and I guess men too, but it's obviously that's all targeted mostly toward young, attractive women. How do you get them to get involved in this stuff? He said, it's very easy. He said, we patrol the streets, Los Angeles, New York, wherever the case, and we listen for the very phrase that I just said. What are you willing to do to have this or that? And he said, and you hear it all the time. People say, I would do anything to have this or that. And he said, we swoop right in and say, how much do you mean that? That's how it works. And we find here the Lord is saying, what would one give in exchange for their soul? And we think, okay, well, doing something has no eternal value. It absolutely does if it impacts the way that you live. And the way that you live ends up impacting the way that you work, because what you're working for, what is the end game? You see, because things are good. Stuff is good. Careers are good. Vacations are nice. All these things. But is any of it worth our soul? Is any of it worth the soul of another? See, we have to understand, friends, as particularly as believers, all right? We're in a very, not just divisive time, but we're in a very confusing time, to where a lot of people are really wondering what is real? What is going on? How do I find the answers? And we have the answer. We have. If you've come to know Christ, you have the answer. The answer is Jesus. Period. End of discussion. That's how it works. But the thing is, are we doing that? Are we sharing that? Now, one hears that and they think, well, people are so uncomfortable talking about all these things and church things and religious things and stuff. Well, let me comfort you in this, and I absolutely stand by this. Jesus had nothing to do with religion. Okay, that is a man-made part of things. Okay, when we understand the healing nature, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, every way, the healing nature of Jesus, the love of Jesus, and the understanding of what he taught. Oftentimes what we hear, especially in these big, grand discussions and who's this and who's that, well, Jesus had nothing to do with that, because that's what he told the Pharisees. He said, you don't even know God. Think about that for a minute. All these religious leaders then is no different than the ones now. He said, you don't even know God. You have no idea what you're talking about, because you're not sharing the truth with people. You share what you've learned from a book or what's been passed down from some theologian, but you don't know me. And that is why it says later in Scripture that many will come to me on that day, and that's the day of the judgment and whatever the case. And he's going to say, but I don't know you. But they're going to say, well, look, I did this and I did this and I taught that. And he's going to say, yeah, I know you did, but I wasn't there. When we share Jesus with those that we care about, and maybe even strangers that we don't know, maybe we don't have the words. Maybe we don't have the platform. But friends, you have the ability to be kind. You have the ability to share a kind moment. Maybe it's, I have it all the time. And again, this is nothing to do with me, but I find this interesting a lot of times. And I'm not a big giant guy, but I'm a little over, about 6'2". And so that gives me a little height advantage. And it's amazing how many times I'm in the store and some person of a little shorter stature, whether it's an older lady or whoever, doesn't matter. They're trying to get something and they'll look and say, sir, could you help me get that? And I'm more than glad to do it. That is a kind act. Again, nothing's involved in that. There's no word exchange other than thank you, I'm glad to help, whatever. But that is the kindness. That's what Jesus says to do, to love one another. In other words, make it count. Make what you do matter. Make it fruitful. Make it productive, not just for a paycheck. Make our work matter. And it's not just on Sunday morning. It's whenever you have the opportunity. Jesus said again in Matthew chapter 9, he said, the harvest is truly plentiful. In other words, there's a lot of opportunity. But the laborers are few. There are so few that are willing. Why? I'm too busy. I got this, I got that. But why do you have any of those things? Because God gave you the ability to do it. Make our work matter. We're not doing works in order to earn God's favor. We're using the ability and the talent and the opportunities that he gave us to show him to others. That's what we're here for. When Jesus ascended, the disciples were standing there looking, and the angels in the clouds, they said to the disciples, why are you standing here gazing? In other words, don't you have something to do? That wasn't a rude statement. That was a thought-provoking statement. Didn't he ask you to go do something? And we'll talk about that tomorrow, of what it was that he said to them and why that's important. Watching our work. Why do you do it? How do you do it? And what is the end result? Are you concerned about that? God bless you, friends. We'll see you tomorrow.